on DAB Digital Radio and 1089 and 1053 AM.
The Two Mics live from New York City on Talk Sport.
Good morning, I'm Mike Graham, he's Mike Parry. You're listening to the Two Mics on the warm-up live from New York City. We're here on another explosive weekend for Premier League football as failed England manager Roy Hodgson makes his debut for Crystal Palace at home against Southampton in a little while away from now. He says he feels energised, but he's going to need more than energy to recover from having no points and no goals after 4 games. I know it's not his fault, but if you're a Crystal Palace fan, do you really think he's the answer? 08717 22 3344. We're not glossing over the problems at Everton either. We'll be talking about those. Plus, we're looking ahead to Liverpool-Burnley as today's game at Anfield is looking like a must-win for Jurgen Klopp down in 8th place. Also coming up on the show, we'll have a 1-minute moan. You're listening to the Two Mics live from New York City right here on Talk Sport. A bit of a jazzy feel to the show this morning, right. Mr. Parry.
Do they call that lounge?
The sort of lounge lizard type music, yes. Lounge lizard is what I've been accused of being in the past, I have to say. Very good morning to you, by the way.
Very apt description. Very good morning to you, Mike. Not many hours since we were at these very microphones for the show last night. Went very well.
It did.
And particularly interested in the Palace fans this morning, how they feel about their new boss, because he has no doubt divided opinion. Some are saying that, he's the safe pair of hands, which the club needs now to try and steer them to safety, with a 12-point deficit to overcome at the bottom of the Premier League. But others that we've spoken to, and I think it's fair that I can speak for both of us here, saying we have our doubts whether Roy Hodgson, at the age of 70 and with the track record of management behind him, has the skill set, really, to try and improve Palace's fortunes and rescue them.
Are we being slightly unfair to the man? Because given his disastrous reign at England, which he doesn't regard as disastrous, he says they played 56 games, we only lost 7. I mean, the 7 games that they lost were quite important games. Very silly
statement.
It is a silly statement. However, I suppose if you're Roy Hodgson, you're going to say, well, hang on, forget about my England career. What about my career at West Brom? What about my career at Fulham? What about my many different managerial positions in clubs around the world? What about how I set up the Swiss Academy so that they've now got a great national team and all of that? You know what I mean?
But the answer to that, again, came from fans that we've already spoken to over the last 24 hours, and that is that if you put him into a very big club like Liverpool's one of the biggest clubs in the world, won 5 European Cups, and within half a season, the view of the Liverpool board was that Mr. Hodgson wasn't able to manage a club of that size.
Right.
The other big job that he was given is the England job.
Yes.
And I'm afraid that was disastrous. So if he goes to what you'd call homely family clubs like West Bromwich Albion, like Fulham, like Swedish clubs that he's managed, and the Swiss national team. Was it
Swiss?
He
kind of was involved with the Swiss national setup, wasn't it?
That's right. Well,
funnily enough, one of the things that is one of his claims to fame is that it was Roy Hodgson that set up the way that Switzerland plays now.
Yes, that's right.
I'm sorry, I don't see Switzerland at the top of any world rankings anywhere.
No, I don't. And I think it's a fatuous claim on your CV to say, look, I've done well here, and there, if the level of your achievement is average.
Yes.
And that's not being rude to West Brom or to Fulham, because they had glory, some glory days under Roy Hodgson, but they're not the biggest club. Now, OK, you could say, well, Palace fits the bill for him because it's a homely family club, but it's a club in crisis.
And he is from Croydon, of course.
He is from Croydon, and I'm not sure that he is the right man for a club in crisis.
Yes.
Chris Coleman had gone in there, and Chris Coleman wouldn't, because he's got a great job now with Wales, and he's got a chance of replicating the glory he had in the last tournament.
He has, although they're not yet qualified. They may not qualify.
No, they may not, I know, but I mean, he's made a thrilling comeback in that tournament after 5 draws. And he's the sort of guy you need, the sort of guy who really, will roll up his sleeves and get stuck in. The trouble with Mr. Hodgson is that he believes himself to be professorial.
He does.
And
I wonder about the relationships he has with some of the players, some of the individual players, because one of the things he said in the many interviews that he's given is that he doesn't really want to keep talking about the England situation, but he said this: I'm afraid all jobs tend to end sadly or badly, so when something happens, as did happen against Iceland, which is very hard to explain, it's when people are way below the form they've been showing, it's hard to take. Well, surely that's the manager's job, to make sure that they're not way below the form they've been showing.
That is such a telling statement, because as you just quite rightly say, if you're the England manager, you don't get many opportunities to put the players together and get them to excel.
Right.
So you've got to have an innate ability to get them to raise their game at a specific moment.
Well, it's a bit like what we do for a living, right? We can't just turn up and sit down and expect the show to go smoothly.
Not you sitting there.
Yes, you might say that we're capable of making anything sing and making work and all of that.
Yes.
However, you have to sort of belt and brace embraces it, if you like, by making sure you do some research, by making sure you actually read something, by knowing what's going on.
Yes.
You can't just, like, if you're the England manager, you can't expect just to turn up with the players once every 3 months and get a good tune out.
Well, the point is, take the Iceland game. It should not have taken an England manager very much effort to get the England players to raise the game against what is regarded as a lowly footballing nation, just through the numbers that they've got, not through the talent of their players, just through the numbers of people in Iceland.
Well, I bet you can't name one member of the Iceland team. Sigurdsson?
Because he now plays for Everton.
Yeah, well,
that's
there you
about
are.
it. Yeah.
That's about it.
But what I was going to say is, do the Palace fans realise that Mr Hodgson has now got to instill that do or die, win at all costs spirit into his team for at least the next 12 games?
Well, it's a
he
bit
couldn't
like,
do it in one game against
no,
Iceland with the best English players around.
Yeah.
Is he going to be able to do it with a squad of Palace players who so far have proven themselves to be extremely average?
Well, you say that, but actually their last performance when they were out last weekend wasn't so bad. I mean, you know, they could have won the game. We had a Palace fan on last night saying they had 68% of the possession.
Yep.
And actually, it was the one game you might have kept Frank de Boer on for because they showed some quite good spirit. And if it wasn't for Dan missing that open goal, they would have at least got a point.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the Iceland game, because the other thing that I found was incredible about Hodgson and his preparation with the team was that everybody knew there was a guy there who was a long throw specialist, and you should practice defending against a long throw.
Exactly.
First long throw Iceland get, they score a goal.
They did,
and you go, well, hang on, did you not practice that?
Yeah, well, it all goes down to the daft idea of Harry Kane taking corners and all that. You tend to... See, this is what I mean about the professorial.
Yeah.
I think Mr Hodgson sometimes says, I'm going to shock them with my,
my massive intellect.
I'm going to shock my massive intellect, and I'm smarter than the average bear, and I'm going to bring in a few tactics here that nobody expected.
Yeah.
Well, we certainly didn't expect Harry Kane to be taking corners, because he's actually very good at heading the ball in the penalty area because he's a centre-forward.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
And then, as you quite rightly say, and to face up to the long throw expert, what I'm going to do, my boys are not going to mark anybody who might receive that ball 30 yards from the touchline.
Yes.
It's ludicrous.
Exactly right. And I think he's also gone a long way. We had quite a few tweets last night on the show talking about how some people have never forgiven him for his performance as England manager, particularly towards the end. Yeah. And particularly at the end where he wouldn't come in, when he came to the press conference after having to be persuaded for about an hour and a half by the FA.
He did.
Because he felt like he didn't have to answer to anyone.
What am I doing
I think
here?
that kind of arrogance is what people don't like about him.
Yes, I totally agree. He seems to believe... I mean, do you remember just before he got the England job, and he'd had his unfortunate experience at Liverpool, but then he had a couple of good clubs, obviously, West Brom, Fulham. But he then kept referring, this comes from our friends in Fleet Street, at every press conference then, not necessarily on the record, he kept referring to the fact that I'm a football man. I'm a football man,
Yeah.
He would look reporters in the eyes, and ask them a question. He'd say, I'm a football man. And what he was really saying was, you don't really understand what I understand about football.
That's right.
So this is
you're being rather impertinent by even asking me about it.
Yes, that's right. This is the professorial attitude again.
Yeah.
Don't you understand how deeply I understand football? I'm an expert. I'm a football man.
Yeah.
You're not, my boy. You're a scribbler. You know what I mean? It was that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and again, it's the arrogance that people don't like. But I think we should get some Crystal Palace fans on the phone, because they'll be going to the game. Crystal Palace against Southampton. It's the early kick-off. Would you like to give out the non-mangled mouth version of the number?
I certainly will. Even though we're in New York, the number's the same.
It is.
Because you're not in New York, we are.
Yeah.
And the number is...
I am in New York.
Oh, you are? Yeah, I wasn't pointing at you. I was pointing to the microphone and to our millions of listeners.
I see.
OK, it's 08717 22 3344. Give us a call, please, because you could be a Palace fan on your way to the game. And the other thing that you may be aware of, I'm sure you are if you're a Palace fan, and we certainly are, after today's game, the fixture list becomes horrendous again.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrendous. I think they're away at both the Manchester clubs, aren't they?
I think they are.
And is it Chelsea as well?
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, that, to me, is 0 points out of 9.
And as we have to point out, they are now, after Bournemouth won their first game last night, they are now the only team with no points, no goals, no wins,
That's right.
no hope. And Roy Hodgson.
Yeah, that's right. And and Roy Hodgson is Atlas. He's Mr. Atlas because he's actually got the weight of the Premier League world on his shoulders.
Yeah.
He's at the bottom, and the whole of the rest of the Premier League are resting on his shoulders.
Going back to New York City to do the things I never did. I'm heading back to New York City.
TalkSport, we are the Two Mics. We're live in New York City because, of course, we are doing a live show as well.
We are.
Which is for people who are here at the City Winery down on Varick Street, and that will happen around about sort of 12:30, 1 o'clock our time.
That's right.
5:30, 6 o'clock your time.
That's
over
right.
there. You can watch it, of course, and we tell you how to do that on the Two Mics website, the2mics.co.uk. We're looking for Crystal Palace fans this morning, though. 08717 22 3344. We're going to talk to John Solako, Crystal Palace legend, a little bit later on. Let's talk to Louis, though, now, who's on his way to the game. Louis, very good morning to you.
Good morning, lads.
Yeah, hi, Louis.
You're right. No, my point was basically, obviously, I've been listening to you lads for the last few days, and obviously a lot going on over Sky and everything about talking to the managers. But for me, my issue is not with the managers as a Palace fan, it's the issue with the players. My issue massively is with Benteke. For me, he's not good enough, and he shouldn't be playing. You've got a striker that only wants to head the ball, and there's been so much grief on De Boer and previous managers that we've had about getting the best out of our players. But to be fair, the players just aren't good enough. And for me, he shouldn't be in the side. And I think De Boer personally wasn't given enough time.
So whose fault is it that the squad isn't good enough, Louis? I mean, do you have to go back to the previous manager and say, well, you know, he should have strengthened the squad ahead of this season?
Isn't it the club?
Well, I don't know. Louis, who do you think it is?
I personally go to Parish. My eyes are on Parish all the time because there were so many talks on different signings coming in. We've been messed around for so long about the Zacco deal. And not being funny, we offered 20 million from the start of the window. All it was, 5 million's nothing for an extra 5 million's nothing in this transfer window. 25 million for a defender who showed his class last year should be worth that. 30 million for him. Sacco. He is a very good centre half. He does exactly what he says he will do, and when he hopes he is fit, he will be in the side. But our issue at the moment is getting players fit. We've got Zaha's out at the moment. Obviously, we've got other players that are out. And
but that's no good. You see, Louis, that's no good. You've got to have a squad these days. That's why, you know, clubs like Everton are going around buying, you know, multiple midfield players. I agree, it's not working yet. I agree, it's not working yet. But I mean, that's what I mean. You can't blame it on injuries anymore.
I don't think you can, no.
This is my point exactly, though. This is where it goes to Parish and obviously the owners and the club. Because for me, De Boer's gone in with the idea that he wants to bring in players, and unfortunately, we didn't bring in players. And we were told to bring the Afro Sacco from West Ham. No doubt. But then again, it puts that pressure on Benteke. If he's not playing well, then he puts him in the side. We let Dwight Gale go a few seasons back. Okay, he's not a Premier League player. But do you know what? He proved when he was with us, he scores goals. Glenn Murray.
OK, well, Louis, thank you very much indeed for your contribution. You sound like a very frustrated Palace fan, but that will be the order of the day.
Well, let's see whether Roy Hodgson can somehow shake it up into something worthy of Crystal Palace fans, because 4 games, no goals whatsoever. It's not a very good start. Let's talk to John Solaka, who knows a bit about scoring goals for Crystal Palace. More than 200 games, of course, that he played for the club. John, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
Hi, John.
Morning, guys.
Do you think Louis right that Christian Benteke is not good enough for Crystal Palace?
It's not a case he isn't good enough. I mean, the guy's got pedigree and he can score goals. I just don't think he's come with the right mind frame. You need to work hard. I think that's the first requirement, first ingredient for any striker is to work hard. And he's a leader and he's a top class player. He's played right up there with Villa and Liverpool, and you know he's come to Palace. And although he scored goals at times, I mean his goal record's great, but I think just his body language isn't great. I think he needs to dominate. He needs to be that senior player, that leading figure.
But John, I don't understand. How can a player not work hard? It's his job. I mean, you know, if his job was as a road sweeper, you've got to sweep up what's on the road, you know, and you apply yourself to making sure there's no litter. So a footballer's job, if you're a striker, is to put every ounce of effort in your body into trying to score goals. Why would anybody who's a professional footballer do anything different?
Mark, it's scary. That's a great question. Why don't they? You know, I generally think sometimes they get into a comfort zone. I think they are trying. They are training hard. They are playing hard. They are giving enough. And, you know, the clear indication, the people will tell you, the fans. The fans will tell you, they pay their money to go and watch, and they'll say, did you put in a shift for me? Have you shown me something? Have you lifted my spirits? Have you picked me up? Was I right to pay my money to come and watch you play? And if they say no, then that's the yardstick. And at the moment, the fans are saying he's not doing enough. And,
right.
You know,
does that spread through the team then? John, does that spread through the team? Do the midfield players say, what's the point of working hard to supply this man when he doesn't want to do it himself?
When you've got a successful team, like you've got people that are prepared to say things to each other. Now, in that dressing room, we used to have Mile Jedinak And Damien Delaney is still in there. But at their height, they would tell you. They would tell you if it wasn't good enough. They'll tell you if you could have done more. They would tell you into your face, and you would have it out. And that is the problem now. I don't think enough players, there's big enough characters in there. We haven't got the leaders in that team that are going to grab each other by the scruff of the neck and say, hey, come on, we're going to give a shift today because, Selhurst Park was a fortress. And when you went there, you went into that rubbish little dressing room that you hated. You came out, the ultras were in your face, it was singing, and then the guys were like that, come on, we'll get in your face. And you've got to bring a game today if you're going to get a result here at Selhurst Park. And now it's too easy. We're playing, we try and play out the back and no real identity. We've lost our DNA of getting up and at people. And that's really Benteke. He's got to get up, get in people's faces, get his elbows up, be hard to play against, hold it up, stick the ball up in the air, and I'll win the headers and we'll get the knockdowns and we'll box it in. But so that's what Roy's got to go back to. He's got to go back.
And
to
can
that
Roy do that? Is he that kind of manager? Because I get the impression from his time at England, certainly. I'm not talking from when he was at Fulham or at West Brom, but when he was at England, he had this, as Mike Parry said, kind of professorial way of talking, where he was sort of talking about the theory of football and how important it is to have a certain mindset and all of that. But he didn't strike me as a guy that puts the fear of God into players.
No, I do think we've got Roy at the wrong time. Roy's 70 now, and the England thing's left a little bit.
It's a very diplomatic way of putting things, John. Got him at the wrong time. You mean that it's, we've employed a knackered sort of product?
You said it. I didn't say that.
Yeah, well, I'm being a bit unkind, perhaps. But I mean, yeah. No.
Well, let me put it to you this way. Gabriel has tweeted us here. He said, hiring Roy Hodgson is like getting one of those soaps, hiring an actor who was famous 30 years ago and has done nothing since. Doomed to failure.
Yeah, the J.R. Ewing of Crystal Palace.
I can't disagree with that either.
No,
Look,
no.
He's vastly experienced. He's a great guy. He's got Ray Lewington there. I'd love to have seen... I saw Jamie Carragher tweet about why not get Neville in there with Ray and maybe Roy. Yeah. Roy should be mentoring a younger, hungrier guy. I just feel someone. The Palace job needs energy. It needs someone to come in and.
It does.
What we've had is your Dowies. We've had your Holloways, your Warnocks. We've had Pardew and Pulis, and then we had Sam. Who knew the English game and who were tough, talking, hard-working. English British managers, and we tried to change the DNA. Brought Frank de Boer in. He won. What did he win? 3-4 titles at Ajax and went to Inter Milan.
4, I think, on the trot. Yeah. The other thing is, John.
I mean, the guy's a winner.
Yeah, and the other thing is, John...
He won as many titles with Ajax as he lost games for Crystal Palace.
He did, yeah, he did a brilliant record. But the other thing is, John, I know it sounds ridiculous, but the first picture I saw of Roy Hodgson when he went back to Crystal Palace is he's got a pair of shorts on, he's running around on the pitch. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's laughable to young men aged about 26 or 27 to see a guy who really looks as though he's just entered the Butlins Pathelli Knobbly Knees competition. If you see what I mean.
I mean, do you know what? Fair play to Roy. He's got energy. He wants to do the job. He's thrown his hat in the ring. It's a bit of a curveball for me to... I thought Frank should have got more of a chance. I thought he wasn't backed in the transfer market early enough to get the players out and get the ones in that he wants. But you stand still in this league and, you struggle. You've got to go in and buy 4 or 5 quality players. The squad isn't strong enough. So, look, Roy's got to go in there and work magic. He needs Sacco back, but he can't rush him. He needs Zaha back, who is fantastic for Palace. And he needs the rest to pull their fingers out. It's the same. Players get managers a sack and... they weren't playing for Frank, and that's why ultimately, Steve Parish, and especially the American boys, don't get relegation. They can't be in that position. It's not part of the business model. So it's ruthless. So if they're in any doubt, they've got to change it and try and stay up just on the business front. But from a footballing point of view, Palace have just got to get back to what we're about. We should have someone like Andre Gray up front. He was right under our noses, went off to Burnley, and now has gone to Watford. They're the players Palace should have: quick, strong, fast, working hard, got that desire, that South London spirit. So
any team would want to play like team would want to play like that, including Mayhem Everton, which we'll get to a bit later. John, are you still having your haircut at that barber's in Stockbroker Belt?
Hey, have you seen the time?
Yeah, but John and I share the same barber, you see.
Really?
Been going there for 30 years, yeah.
30 years. Well, there you go.
Yeah, man, like I was born in New York City on a Monday. It seems I was out trying to shoot by 2 to noon.
Not sure about that trail because we were just describing it as 2 bad apples.
Yes,
surely there's only 1 bad apple in this particular scenario.
One bad apple don't make us. Or whose record was that?
That was like a Jackson
the Osmonds
5
or something, wasn't it?
Oh,
yeah, Jackson 5. Yeah, one bad apple don't mean the whole barrel is bad.
Don't ruin the New York songs that we're playing throughout the course of the show, by the way. We're having a great time. We should tell people what we've been doing since we've been here.
Yes.
Because we got in like Thursday afternoon.
We certainly did.
We spent most of Thursday afternoon and evening filming various bits and pieces.
On Broadway.
We were on Broadway.
Broadway.
We went to Costello's, which is the... you're not going to sing every time I mention anything to do with a word that's got a song about it.
That's right.
But anyway, we went to Costello's, which is, of course, the famous watering hole that we talk about an awful lot on the On The Record podcast, which you can get as well. And it's turned into an amazing place called the Overlook Bar.
That's right.
Which is now on about 3 floors. We're going to have an after party there later on today.
We certainly are.
Once we've finished our show at the City Winery.
That's right.
And one of the things that we'll
have to de-stress after this.
We will have to de-stress. Now, I, differently to you, eventually kind of flaked out at about 8:30 on Thursday night.
You did.
Having been having a very long day.
I was still going strong, of
sorts of
course.
refreshments. Well, you say that, but I mean, you're the guy whose heart is about to give out.
Yeah, I know.
So I went home and I slept pretty much solidly for about 11 hours.
Yeah, well, I didn't need 11 hours. I slept for about 7. Now,
but we'd been up in the morning at 4 o'clock because we had to fly out of Heathrow with British Airways quite early, and fantastic flight, and all that went very well.
Yes.
But I just knew that I needed, because last night I was only going to get about 4 hours sleep before we did this show. So I banked my sleep, and I do that a lot. 11 hours of banked sleep is worth, 2 in the bush, as they say.
Well, that's very good indeed, because it's funny you should say that, because, of course, when we're at home back in London, I study all my journals there. I've taken to the habit of studying the American journals.
Have you?
Now that we're here. And
is there much of a difference in the journal possibilities?
Funny you should say that, but I've been studying a journal with a report in it by a guy called Matthew Walker. He's a professor of neuroscience and psychology and director of the Sleep and Neuroimaging Laboratory at the University of California, Berkeley, okay?
Really?
And his paper that he's written is Why We Sleep, the New Science of Sleep and Dreams, right?
Yes.
And it's an incredible new book which has thrown a lot more light on the need for human beings to have sleep. And do you know what the biggest conclusion from this report of his is?
What is the biggest conclusion?
And this worries me a bit, because you say I don't get enough sleep.
I don't think you do.
And therefore, what will happen to me in the future?
Yeah.
But one of the possible consequences of not having enough sleep is that you can go a bit gaga, right?
Yes.
And the question is asked after
Is that a medical term you're saying?
Gaga?
Yeah.
Not really. No. But the question is asked after this report has been studied: Did too little sleep result in Mrs. Thatcher, our former Prime Minister, and President Reagan, the President of the United States, where we are now, during the 80s when we lived and worked here, did lack of sleep give them both dementia? It's a quite serious question.
Well, it quite simply would suggest that, if you can keep going, because I think your body can keep you doing things which you're perhaps not best advised to do.
Yes.
Because you're busy and, you can get used to a lack of, a smaller amount of sleep.
Yes.
But I can't be good for you, because sleep is one... I mean, if you look at animals, for example, dogs, cats, whatever, they know that they have to sleep for a certain portion of the day in order to be, useful for the parts of the time when they're awake.
Some animals sleep for a certain portion of the year.
Well, that's
like
true.
Hibernation.
But you also know, if you're suffering from sleep deprivation, that your senses are kind of changed, aren't they? I mean, you get on a train, you're feeling sort of slightly woozy.
Yes.
You're not at your best if you haven't enough sleep.
Well, that's right. Now, both Mrs. Thatcher and President Reagan did suffer from forms of dementia towards the end of their lives.
That's
and
right.
the theory put forward is this: beta amyloid is a sticky toxic protein that builds up in the brain.
Yeah.
It is a key cause of Alzheimer's disease.
Okay.
Now, research from recent reports shows that a lack of sleep can cause amyloid to accumulate, and as a consequence, people may develop dementia sooner than they would normally, okay?
Yeah.
And this has all been done by neurological research at the University of Rochester and other places like that. But Mrs. Thatcher was famous for the fact that she only had 4 hours sleep a night.
Yeah.
So,
although, you see, the trouble is, like with you, and I don't doubt the veracity of some of your claims, but nobody really knows if it's true. I mean, Mrs. Thatcher could tell you till the cows come home she only has 4 hours sleep, but maybe she didn't.
But Mrs. Thatcher never did. It was other people who told you. Because, for instance, she could be on the phone to a world leader at 2 a.m., right, and her aides, would have to be in attendance or something like that. She could then actually call for her car at 6 a.m. the following morning and be on the way to the airport or something like that, And she was famous for not needing very much sleep.
Sure.
Now, some people don't. Now, the other thing that this new report focuses on, and you and I had a conversation about this the other day, is the power nap. Now, I just cannot do the power nap. I just can't do it. If I suddenly decide I'm going to have 1 hour's sleep, I wake up groggy and I just don't want to do it. I just want to keep on going.
I can have a power nap for 10 or 15 minutes and actually feel remarkably refreshed. In fact, after this show, I'm going to go and probably have a power nap back at the hotel before we go and do the live show, because we've got a couple of hours spare.
Yeah. Well, this says here in this report, right, it says, modern humans are not sleeping the way nature intended. Our ancient forebears evolved a biological way of sleeping, which is still practiced in cultures untouched by electricity, such as the Gabra hunter-gatherer tribe in northern Kenya.
Oh, yeah.
And they basically sleep when it's dark, and they get up and they get about when it's light.
Yes.
Now, the power nap thing takes place during the day. Having a daily siesta still exists in South America, Mediterranean, Europe, but the habit is disappearing, causing deadly consequences. In Greece, for example, siestas have largely disappeared since the millennium. And that's because...
Why?
Because modern life can't put up with a siesta. Do you see what I mean?
Because everybody's on the phone all the time.
Exactly, that's right. The way of life of the ancient tribes in Kenya has changed little over thousands of years. They sleep in biphasic pattern, where they have about 7 hours sleep at night, followed by a 30 to 60-minute nap in the afternoon. In fact, all humans, irrespective of culture or geographical location, have a genetically hardwired dip in alertness. In other words, they are programmed for a nap in the mid-afternoon.
Right.
Observe any post-lunch meeting around a boardroom table and that becomes clear. But this is now being eradicated because, as you quite rightly say, the pace of life, the fact that you've got to be up and at it during all your waking hours means that that's gone. In small Greek enclaves where siestas remain intact, such as the island of Icaria, men are nearly 4 times as likely to reach the age of 90 as American males who do not and never have taken a power nap.
Now, that used to be put down to the olive oil diet, though, didn't it? The Mediterranean diet and all that. Because the other interesting thing about talking about countries in Europe is in Scandinavia, where, for example, in places like Sweden, it's light for practically 24 hours.
Can be. In Iceland
during
as well.
The summer months.
22
I remember
hours
hearing
a day.
People telling stories of how the kids are sent out sometimes to play at 3 o'clock in the morning.
That's right.
Because there's no way of knowing what the daylight scenario is.
No, that's right.
So there's, they're not run by the clock almost.
That's right. And your forebearers in Scotland...
Forefathers
in Scotland will have been ploughing their fields at 1 in the morning.
Yeah.
That's why we have the summertime and all that. So during the war,
Sure they weren't just lying around bladderated.
Oh, the wee Bernie Scotsman farmer could get into the fields and plough his fields at night.
Talking of Greece, where I was for a beautiful week a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Do you see that terrible oil tanker disaster that's happened there? And there's loads of oil washing up all the beaches.
It's horrible, isn't it? You don't mind oil tanker disasters in places where...
Well, no, you don't want them anywhere.
No, you don't want them anywhere, but when it happens in, like, Alaska, and there's not many people in Alaska,
No, you don't want them in Alaska.
No, you don't want them anywhere. I don't want to...
That's a terribly selfish way of
No,
looking at the world.
I don't want an oil spill disaster anywhere, but what I'm saying is a blue Azure Sea, which is polluted by foul, filthy oil, looks a lot worse than Alaska.
Well, Alaska's got some blue Azure Sea as well.
Yeah, but Alaska's also got a lot of grey and black and dark and that kind of stuff.
It's got a lot of whales in it.
I don't want to see any oil spilt anywhere, let me tell you that.
Yeah, good
I
recovery.
Do not.
Did you ever see a woman coming out of New York City with a frog in her hand? Did you ever see
Well, there you go. That's the definition of synergy, isn't it?
Yeah.
You got New York City in the song. You got T-Rex. You got Mark Bolan.
That's right.
40 years since he was sadly killed in a car crash in West London. And here we are in New York City, about to embark on yet another adventure.
Absolutely, we certainly are.
Now,
and what a great place to be.
What a fantastic place to be. Yeah, we'll be taking it easy for a couple of hours, and then we'll go off to the City Winery for the live show, which you can watch as well if you're not here. Just go to the2mics.co.uk and find out how to do all that.
That's absolutely
now,
right.
more pressing problems at Goodison, I've got to say. The papers this morning are all still very much dominated by Ronald Koeman and what he's got to say for himself, because he looks, not particularly troubled, but he doesn't look a happy guy to me.
Well, Mr. Koeman, one of Mr. Koeman's strengths is his self-belief, right?
Yes.
You agree with that?
Yes, I would say so.
And his self-belief at Southampton was such that...
But, I mean, we've talked before about Frank de Boer and his Ajax experiences and all that. Koeman, to me, looks the part, but he's not actually playing the part, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but he has played the part in the past, you see. The reason why Everton recruited him was he did so well at Southampton on his first venture into management in the Premier League. So we thought we'd get him before one of the bigger clubs does, because there were people tipping him to go to Arsenal in this country and Barcelona abroad.
Possibly, yeah.
So we thought we'd get him. He's a quality manager. And even, ridiculous sort of analysis of, how long will he stay at Everton before he goes to Barcelona and all this. And then he gave an interview saying he'd love to manage Barcelona one day. So he doesn't have a shortage of self-confidence and belief in himself.
That's fine.
And therefore he imposes upon his players a strict code of discipline. You do it my way.
Yeah.
But so far, doing it his way has proved to be unacceptable.
Well, shall we say less than successful? Certainly,
yeah.
We had an Everton fan on last night on the show who said that he's not entirely certain whether or not Kevin Morales and Ross Barkley, to name just two players, have sort of fallen out with Koeman because of his style. Because don't forget, these young guys who have got bucket loads of money, and this is where it comes back to Roy Hodgson again, they need to be treated in a particular way. To get the best out of them, you can't, I mean, quite a lot of football managers will say you can't just treat them like kids because then they'll behave like kids.
Yeah, I mean, we have not yet had a proper explanation as to why Ross Barkley and Ronald Koeman fell out.
No.
Ross Barkley is a great footballer. He bought a load of midfield players, so it must have been given the message to Ross, look, we don't need you anymore.
Yeah.
And yet, whenever I speak to Evertonians back home, I saw the first 3 games this season live, but I haven't managed. I didn't see the Atalanta game,
right.
And of course Spurs.
Yeah, we were sort of in transit, but that
Spurs
was a
I couldn't
disaster.
get up to, so that wasn't live. But what I'm saying is, those who've seen it said that the midfield's all over the place because there's too many midfield players.
And also, did he not drop Pickford for that game as well?
Well, this is the midweek game, Atalanta. I had to pick up on this because obviously we were in transit when that happened. But he dropped Pickford. He dropped Idrissa Gueye. He put Betsic in his place. And I just can't understand why you're weakening a team in a competition which your ambition's to win.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. What are you saying? We're saving the players for Old Trafford on Sunday. Sunday's quite a long time away from Thursday. As Arsene Wenger actually said this week, he said there is no difference between playing Wednesday and Saturday or Thursday and Sunday.
Yeah.
And you don't weaken your team.
There's a psychological difference, though, isn't there?
I suppose there's a psychological difference, but you don't weaken your team in the middle of the week every time you've got a tough game at the weekend.
Well, otherwise, I would have thought so.
No, otherwise you're going to go out of a competition.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole point of being in the Europa League, which is quite a strenuous competition to be in, I would have
19 games to win it.
Yeah, but I would have thought now that following Jose Mourinho's example, you win it, you then get into the Champions League.
Yep.
And I'd have to say for Everton, that's about the best chance they've got to get into the Champions League because I don't really think...
Without a shadow of a doubt now...
The way they've started, they're not going to get in the top 4.
No, I don't think they are. And I would have hoped that we'd have started, with a few stunning results against the bigger teams. And I quite welcomed the rash of big clubs, including Manchester United on Sunday, who were going to play. But I would love to hear from Everton fans because when you read this morning what Mr. Koeman has said, it is not the time or place to criticise the players or myself.
Yes.
Well, who are we going to criticise then for Everton's lacklustre start to the season? If you're an Everton fan and you want to talk to us about this, 08717 22 33 44. Now, I'm going to say for the first time, probably in history, certainly the first time that I've mea culpa'd myself or admitted to this.
Do you want to admit to mea culpa'ing yourself?
No,
I'm not sure that's wise.
I am very worried about Everton's game at Old Trafford tomorrow. Have some sympathy with me, please, people, because I'm 3,000 miles away. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
I'm almost certainly going to be watching this game in an Irish sports bar in Manhattan, which will probably have a majority of Manchester United fans in it.
Well, possibly.
Because Manchester United is
a lot of Liverpool fans here, by the way.
A lot of Liverpool
they'll
fans.
Be watching their game today.
Manchester United is obviously one of the biggest clubs in the world. There are Everton followers in New York. And we spoke to one of them on the...
NYC Evertonians.
NYC Evertonians, and we spoke to one of them last night, who very kindly... He had an American accent, talking English football very, very authoritatively, which is a great thing about this country. The fact that the Premier League's here doesn't mean that people just suddenly become Johnny-come-lately English football fans. They are very knowledgeable. And the guy knew an awful lot about, the history of the club and the way he thought things should be done. So if you're an Everton fan, whether you're on this side of the Atlantic in New York City like we are, or whether you're in Britain, give us a call, please. 08717 223344. I want to know if, like me, you have a bit of foreboding about what's going on at Everton at the moment, because it should have worked. And the key issue was why we didn't buy a striker of any sort before the window closed. I mean, I think I said to you off air that Troy Deeney suddenly came into the frame. Well, OK, Troy Deeney's not Romelu Lukaku, who you think is going to devastate Everton tomorrow.
Well, I think it's going to be a bad result for Everton. I can't see it going any other way. Really.
Nevertheless, Troy Deeney is a target man. He's a big man up front.
Also, there was a time when Olivier Giroud's name was in the frame. There was a time when Jamie Vardy's name was in the frame.
Yes, that's right. All of that.
But I don't know enough about the machinations behind the scenes at Everton to find out whether Ronald Koeman is not getting what he wants, or whether they're just not able to give them enough money to get what he wants.
I think it's fairly well known that Mr. Koeman didn't fancy Jamie Vardy. Yeah. Now, that might sound preposterous because Jamie Vardy is one of the best strikers in the Premier League.
And he's a goal scorer.
He's a goal scorer, and I think if Everton had used a bit of muscle financially, which they seem to have now, they might have been able to secure him. But I was told authoritatively from people at Everton that actually Mr. Koeman didn't fancy Jamie Vardy's style of play.
No.
And he would much rather have what I was described to me as a big lump up front. And I don't know whether you could describe Romelu Lukaku as a big lump, could you?
Well, I think he's kind of become slightly more sophisticated than that. But he certainly was that for a while at Everton, but he worked very well as a big lump.
Yeah, he did. But I mean, when we talk big lump, I'm sort of thinking about, like, with the greatest respect, Tony Cascarino, a guy who actually is a wrecking ball in the penalty area as well as
a top man, Tony.
Yeah, of course he's a top man. But what I'm saying is, so big and so strong. Yeah. You know, players couldn't intimidate him, and then people can play off him in the penalty area to their advantage.
Yes.
I wouldn't describe Romelu Lukaku as that anymore. I'd describe him as an individually very talented and skillful footballer.
Yeah, and I think, there are those who are already saying, could he actually be better than Wayne Rooney in terms of the number of goals he scores in his career at Manchester United?
He's 24 now.
And it's very possible.
24 now. Rooney started scoring goals for Manchester United when he was 18. Yeah. So he's got, he had a 6-year start, didn't he?
Really? Did he go that young?
Yeah, he did.
Did he?
If you remember, the 2004 in Lisbon, when he broke his metatarsal, I remember to this day seeing him sitting on the touchline with his hands behind him, with a look of exasperation on his face.
Yes.
And do you know what? He got kicked in the back of the foot, and the vibration went through his boot and broke his toe at the front, amazingly. Yeah. And that summer, because he exploded onto the scene, although Manchester United had had an eye on him for months, it was a popular rumour in the city of Liverpool, because I think one of Wayne Rooney's family was a taxi driver.
Oh, yeah.
So people would jump in the taxi at Lime Street and all this kind of stuff, have a conversation with him. It became fairly clear that Manchester United were interested in the boy,
Yeah.
And I think they knew he was going. But when he got to Manchester United, he was 18. He because of his metatarsal, didn't play for about 6 weeks at the start of the new season. Then that was an amazing debut in the Champions League, remember?
I do remember
against,
that.
Was it Besiktas or
I think
somebody?
it was, yeah.
And he scored a hat-trick. One left, one right, and a free kick.
Okay.
New York City man, you just say go and that is it. I'm a New York City man.
It's a great song.
Just say go and that.
Oh, Lou Reed,
Yeah.
Walk on the Wild Side.
That's the man.
I said, baby.
From the Velvet Underground.
Walk on the Wild Side.
I'd rather listen to Lou Reed than you doing Lou Reed, if you don't mind. Now, Laura has tweeted us in. She's an Evertonian. She says she's really worried. I'm going to the game tomorrow and dreading it, she says. Thursday's game was horrific to watch. Let's now talk to Matt, who's an Everton fan, who's called in to Talk Sport. Matt, a very good afternoon to you.
Hi, mate. I just want to say, love listening to your show. It's great.
Thank you very much.
Very kind of you, Matt.
Thank you very much indeed.
I'll tell you what, there is a concern, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is that Ronald Koeman's not the right man for the job. I mean, you look at what he did at Southampton. He was a great manager, but you had to look at the players that he had. You had Sadio Mane, Lallana, he had a great squad. He's come to Everton, he's got the likes of Lukaku and Barkley, all playing really good football. And now that these players aren't there, and you look around at the squad, and I just don't see it. I just don't see what we're going to do this season. I'm worried. I think we could be fighting for relegation if this continues.
Well, I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, Matt, and I have to say I've got to disagree with you there, and I've got to, if you've got any thoughts that, Mr. Koeman's the wrong man for the job and should be considering his future, I'm also going to massively disagree with you there. But the point is...
Well, we'll soon see, though, won't we?
We will soon see, but did we all build up our expectations too high, Matt? Did we all get carried away that because Everton were active in the transfer market, we were going to be a top four contender?
Yeah, I believe you're right. I mean, we've signed too many midfielders. David Klassen is just not the player for me. Gylfi Sigurdsson's a great man, but do you really bring in Gylfi Sigurdsson and Wayne Rooney? They both play the same spot. He's not rotating the squad correctly for me, and I think that's where he's doing it wrong. He's not choosing the correct team. He's not picking a winning team. Kevin Morelos had a great pre-season, a wonderful pre-season. He's got some cracking goals. And then he gets dropped. What is that?
Well, is that a personal thing? We think that might be a personal thing between Mr. Koeman and...
but I mean, how many personal problems are you going to have with the players?
It's a very good question. If there's something going on behind the scenes and Mr. Koeman has got rod of iron, but it's upsetting players who have sensibilities, it's not good, is it? There's a bit of action going on.
There is a bit of action going on. Stay there just for 1 second, Matt,
please,
because believe it or not, in 6 minutes of Roy Hodgson's new reign at Crystal Palace, there's been a goal at Selhurst Park. Let's go to Alex Crook. Alex, have Palace scored?
No, they haven't. It's Crystal Palace 0, Southampton 1. Roy Hodgson.
Deary me. I mean, after everything we've said as well, let's just go back to Matt briefly. Matt, I mean, if you were to have your druthers and you were able to say, look, it is time for Ronald Koeman to walk away because it's not working, I mean, who would Everton go for next?
That's a big question. I mean, I
really think it's an extreme question.
Well, I've just asked him.
Maybe Manuel Pellegrini. I thought he was a better choice than Ronald Koeman at the beginning of the point when...
I can't believe I'm listening to a conversation between a responsible broadcaster and an Everton fan, albeit a disillusioned Everton fan like me, about who would you take instead of Mr. Koeman. Mr. Koeman is going to be a great manager at Everton, but we're all a bit down about the fact that we've had a very difficult start to the season, having played some of the best Premier League clubs who are going to achieve honours this season. It's not a crisis, it's just a disappointment. So, let's get into perspective.
See. Matt, listen, thank you very much indeed for your call. If you are an Everton fan, you are going to be concerned. We've still got time to hear from you. Let's talk to another Everton fan, though, who's called in. Right. Very good afternoon to you, sir.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, hello. Are you okay?
Yeah, very good indeed, Phil. What do you want to say?
I don't think he's going to get sacked. I think he'll walk, if I'm honest with you, because I'm absolutely bitterly disappointed with not the results, just what he's done since pre-season. I mean, it's dead simple. We had Lukaku, who we all know was going to get sold. He had Coney in as well, who he let go. He joined a Turkish club. And we replaced him with an unknown quantity in Sandro. I mean, that's just basics. That's common sense. That's not down to luck or whatever. We've got Steve Walsh, who's meant to be in charge of recruitment. And between them, they just don't bring his striker. That's unacceptable.
Well, I agree with that, Phil. I mean... go on.
That's a fact, isn't it? I mean, that's unacceptable. That's poor. We're an attractive club. We're in Europe. We were supposedly going to be going for top 6, so I don't buy that we couldn't get any players in. There's a reason why we didn't sign a striker, point number one. And point number two, ask any Evertonian who our right back is, we don't know. Who our central defenders are, we don't know. He changes a goalkeeper in for a European game. These are poor decisions, and I think I don't honestly think he knows what he's doing, Mike.
Well, listen, this is all very depressing talk, Phil, and I can't possibly, agree with you on he'll walk and all that.
Not depressing. Mike, I'm not moaning about the results. No, that's just actual facts. Forget the results and how we've played. That's poor.
Yeah, but he didn't show this indecisiveness and this sort of bizarre decision-making last season. That's what I don't understand. I mean, last season we did okay.
You're only as good as your last set of results. Yeah. And since the summer, he's done a poor job, period, end of. I'm not saying sack him, but he must be very, very, very disappointed. And what?
Of course I'm very disappointed. I mean... Do you know what? When I saw that fixture list, I thought this is great because I don't fear these big teams, with Mr. Koeman in charge. And we could really surprise a few people. And we did when we went to Manchester City. I'm not saying it was a great game and all that, but coming away from City with a point, that's very positive, and then the machine moves on. And then we've just been walloped about by everybody ever since. And it is depressing. I totally agree with you. I totally agree. But I can only...
3-0.
Yeah.
Mike, we got beat 3-0 against Chelsea. Every Evertonian knew. Obviously, we need a striker. It'll be okay. We've got 4 or 5 days till Thursday.
That's what I thought. I'd have settled for Troy Deeney. I keep saying that, but I would have settled for somebody who could have filled that centre-forward berth. I really would.
But Phil, I'm all as Evertonians. We're all worried, and we're all saying now, we think, is it Nace? I can't even pronounce it. We're all like, when's he back?
Yeah.
I know, it's extraordinary.
We would have laughed if we said we'd have had this conversation 6 months ago. No, he's done a poor job.
Well, I think Phil's absolutely right. Atalanta, by the way, looking at the Serie A league, are 13th in the Italian league.
I know.
I mean, that is not a place that you would expect to lose 3-0 if you're in the best league in the world, finishing 7th last season. It just seems bizarre.
I totally agree with you.
I'm sorry to go on about it, Mr. Parry.
No. Listen,
it's not going to go away, is it?
No, you've got to face the facts. You've got to be pragmatic about what's going on.
It's unlikely to be any better news on Sunday afternoon and Monday in the papers, I would have thought.
It's a worrying... it's going to be a worrying day tomorrow, I have to say. Because, look... I've already accepted, I think, and it's a terrible admission of defeatism, but I've already accepted Everton will probably not win at Manchester United. What I don't want to see is a sizable score to 0 against Everton.
Yeah.
That will be unacceptable.
That would be unsettling, yeah.
La-di-da-di, free John Gotti, the king of New York, the king of New York. La-di-da-di, free John Gotti, la-di-da-di, la-di.
We are Two Mics. This is Talk Sport. Steptoe has tweeted us to say Roy Hodgson's Premier League win percentage is only around 35% over 200-odd games. It's certainly not looking like it's going to get any better, judging by what's going on down at Crystal Palace. I've got something to tell you.
Yes.
Because we were going off down to the City Winery a little bit later on this morning for a show that we're going to put out there about 1 o'clock. If you can't be there, there are possibly still a couple of tickets available. If you can't be there because you're not in Manhattan and you're not even in America, don't worry, because you can watch it by just switching on your computer. If you want to know how to do that, go to the twomics.co.uk.
Yes.
But did you know, and I haven't actually spotted this in the last couple of days, but I'm now going to go look for it.
Right.
There's a new craze which is going around in New York.
A new craze?
With
There's always a new craze in New York.
There is, yeah, there is. But
people dragging rocks around on bits of string and calling them their pets.
I thought that was in California.
No, it was here. It was here. Yeah.
Now, apparently, this originated on the street stalls of Taiwan and spread to China, Malaysia, but has now hit New York City.
And it is.
And what it is a new form of tea drinking, right? It's not Earl Grey. It's not Yorkshire tea. It's not English
PG
breakfast
tips, which
tea.
we have in the studio here in New York.
Tips. It is cheese tea.
Oh,
it's fusion cheese tea. It looks a bit like a pint of lager, which is why I thought you might like it, because it's that kind of consistency. But basically what it is you add lashings of whipped cream cheese to unsweetened iced tea.
No, I can't have that. I'm sorry.
What do you mean you can't have it?
That's not tea. It's not. You can't. How do you define? You define tea by saying you brew tea leaves, and the tea leaves produce the flavour of the tea.
Yeah. Well, how do you think you get iced tea?
Iced
tea is tea that you've made in a pot, and then you've made it cold.
Yeah,
tea.
Tea is not a product in which you insert whipped cream cheese. That then does not. It becomes non-tea.
Well, it can
become something else. No, it's rubbish. It's ludicrous.
Apparently, it's picking up, particularly out in Flushing, which is out by the airport where we came in. It's out by where Shea Stadium used to be.
Flushing Meadow.
And it's quite an Asian sort of community out there, so it might be because of that. But apparently, the Happy Lemon Cafe serves up all sorts of types of cheese tea, including salt cheese tea.
Oh, come off it. The Happy Lemon Cafe, they must be happy round there, because what sort of substances they're ingesting, I've no idea.
There you go. Look, it's a nice looking. I'm going to try and find some of this, and I'm going to take some pictures of you drinking some cheese tea.
I won't be drinking it, mate. Don't bother. Don't waste your time.
Okay. What about breakfast this morning? We didn't have time for breakfast. We're going to go and have some breakfast now.
We're going to have some breakfast.
Go and have some corned beef hash and eggs.
Corned beef hash and eggs.
But no eggs for you, obviously.
No eggs for me.
You have steak and eggs without eggs.
No, I might have.
You could have ham and cheese omelette without eggs.
No, actually, I had pancakes yesterday with a bit of syrup. That was rather nice.
That was good. Now, what else I'm going to tell you is normally, of course, on this show we have a 1 minute moan.
Yes.
I'm so happy. I've got nothing to moan about.
I want to moan about the cyclists in New York.
No, I'm not having you doing cyclists in New York.
I nearly got mowed down by a cyclist in the cycle lane yesterday because the taxi driver stopped in the wrong place. I got out, stepped into a taxi lane.
You've got to be aware of
and then kind of get out of the way. I could have been killed.
You've got to be aware of these things. The point is, right, wherever you go now in any metropolitan area, there are cycle lanes.
Collective madness around the world.
It's a fact of life.
It is a collective madness
around the world. But we're not going to moan about it because we're in New York City. As Adrian Durham said, imagine if you were him. He's sitting in Watford. We're in New York. As he said, he's going to have a word with the management.
Yes.
We came here, of course, under our own steam.
We did. Absolutely.
Thanks to various commercial arrangements that we may or may not be able to admit to.
Well,
but anyway.
You're talking about our pals at...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, you and I are going to go and have a little bit of a rest. Yes, a little bit of a rest, preparing for the live show at City Winery. It's going to happen around about 5 hours from now.
Yes.
I'm delighted. You're delighted. We're both delightful.
We are very delighted.
And I'm very happy to have been sitting here with you for the last 2 hours, Mr. Parry.
And we will report back on today's live show via a series of communications later on.
Check out Facebook Live.
And I will give you all a report and marks out of 10 on how MG performed on the stage.
Yeah, and then there's mass bladderation.
There certainly will be.
This is TalkSport.
On DAB Digital Radio and 1089 and 1053 AM. The warm-up with the two mics on TalkSport.
I've got a lot of people on my radar!